Nelson Mandela's name is known across the world as a symbol of peace, human rights, and equality. His fight against apartheid in South Africa and the struggle he led for the freedom of his country is inspiring. His life story is not only the success story of one person, but it is a message to the entire humanity on how any kind of injustice and oppression can be faced with patience, courage, and unwavering faith. Early life. Nelson Mandela was born on the 18th of July 1918 in a village called Mvezo in South Africa. His full name was Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. His father was Henry Mandela, a chief of the Thembu tribe. His mother's name was Nosekeni. In his childhood he was given the name Rolihlahla, which means, the one who shakes the branches of the tree, that is, a rebel. This name was very symbolic in Nelson Mandela's life because his actions really shook the social and political system of South Africa. His early life was spent in rural areas, where he traditionally lived with his family. Mandela's early education took place in the village school, where his teacher gave him the name Nelson. At that time, under the British education system in South African schools, students were given English names, and this is how Mandela also got the name Nelson. Education and early struggles. Nelson Mandela studied further at Hilton College and the University of Fort Hare. It was while studying at the University of Fort Hare that Mandela met the ideas and leaders who determined the direction of his political life. In 1940, he was expelled due to a student strike at the university. He then moved to Johannesburg and worked as a night watchman in a mine there. During this time he began studying law and developed his interest in politics. Opposition to apartheid. In 1948, the South African government implemented the apartheid policy. Under this policy, discrimination and division between black and white people was legalized. Black people were placed at the bottom of society and were deprived of any kind of equality or rights. Nelson Mandela strongly opposed this unjust system and joined the African National Congress, ANC, which was a major political organization fighting for the rights of black people in South Africa. Mandela was involved in founding the ANC's youth organization, and through it he led the mass movement against apartheid. Initially his struggle was non-violent, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's non-violence principles. Mandela and his comrades organized peaceful protests, sit-ins and strikes. But the government adopted harsh repressive policies to crush these protests. Imprisonment and struggle. After the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, when police opened fire on unarmed demonstrators, killing 69 people, Mandela and his comrades realized that it was not possible to end the brutal system of apartheid through nonviolent struggle. In 1961 Mandela founded an armed organization called Umkhonto we Sizwe, which aimed to wage armed struggle against the apartheid policies of the government. In 1962, Mandela was arrested and charged with treason and inciting violence. He was sentenced to 27 years of rigorous imprisonment. Mandela spent 18 years of his life in Robben Island prison, where he was kept in extremely difficult conditions. He was subjected to mental and physical torture during his imprisonment, but he never gave up. Mandela did not compromise on his principles even while in prison. He served as a symbol for the people of South Africa and people around the world, inspiring them to stand firm against any unjust system. Mandela's release and a new beginning. There was a worldwide demand for the release of Nelson Mandela. Mandela was finally released on the 11th of February 1990. After his release, political changes began in South Africa. Mandela initiated peaceful negotiations to end apartheid and led the process of South Africa's first democratic elections. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, in which people of all races and colors were given the right to vote. Nelson Mandela won the election with a huge majority and became the first black president of South Africa. As president, Mandela encouraged the spirit of reconciliation, peace and equality in society. Under his leadership, South Africa ended the evils of apartheid and ushered in a new era. Mandela's vision: peace and reconciliation. Mandela worked hard to promote a spirit of reconciliation and unity in his country. Not only did he value forgiveness and reconciliation in his personal life, but he also incorporated these values into his political outlook. Despite the atrocities of apartheid, Mandela never pursued a policy of retribution. Instead, he chose a path of dialogue and tolerance with his opponents. He established a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, through which the crimes of apartheid were publicly exposed and an attempt was made to bring justice to the victims. It is another example of Mandela's greatness that he chose peace and reconciliation instead of violence and revenge. Mandela's role internationally. Nelson Mandela became a source of inspiration not only for South Africa but for the entire world. His struggle gave a new dimension to the fight for human rights and equality across the world. He taught the world that any big battle can be won with peace, patience and perseverance. In 1993, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace, which was a symbol of the international community's acceptance of his struggle and his vision. Personal life. Nelson Mandela's personal life was also full of struggles. He had 4 children with his first wife Evelyn Mays, but they divorced in 1957. He then married Winnie Madikizela in 1958, with whom he had 2 daughters. Winnie also remained active in the fight against apartheid while Mandela was in prison. But in 1996, Mandela and Winnie divorced. Later, in 1998, Mandela married Grace Machel, the widow of former Mozambican President Samora Machel. Mandela's contributions and legacy. The life of Nelson Mandela teaches us that with unshakable determination, courage and integrity, any unjust system can be changed. Every aspect of his life reminds us that the greatest power to bring about change in society lies within us. Mandela not only brought freedom to South Africa, but also taught people around the world how to stand up against any kind of oppression. His life is a symbol of the fact that if we put our efforts in the right direction, we can succeed in overcoming even the biggest obstacles. When he died on the 5th of December 2013, the whole world remembered him as a great leader, a protector of human rights and a symbol of truth. Conclusion. The inspirational story of Nelson Mandela is the story of an ordinary man's extraordinary struggle. His life showed how any impossible can be achieved with patience, tolerance and unwavering faith.